Okay, good morning, everybody. We are in Gemarah Sanhedrin. We are on Daf Yud Dalad Amud Beit 14b, making rapid progress. I'm going to share the screen with you straight away so you can see where we are. If you're in the Steinsaltz Gemarah, it's on page 75. If you're in the Art Scroll version, then it's on 14b2. Okay. Right. So let's just have a little recap where we're up to. We were discussing how many judges were required to measure the distance between a corpse found between the two cities. And last week, we discussed a rather bizarre opinion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov's opinion was that this measurement had to be done, not like our Mishnah, which said by 3 judges, and not like Rabbi Shimon, who agreed with the Mishnah and said it was 3 judges, and not like Rabbi Yehuda, who said it was 5 judges, but Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov said it was all 71 judges of the big Sanhedrin, plus the king, plus the Kohen Gadol. And I expressed the view that I thought that that was rather unlikely, that you would get that enormous entourage, basically the entire workings of the state, going out to measure this corpse, the distance from the corpse to the city. But nevertheless, that was Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov's view, and the Gemarah discussed it. And what we said was that Rav Yosef brought an asmachta, a sort of an assistance, not quite a proof, but a bit of help for Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov to support his view. And what he said was that there is a brisa that says that a rebellious elder, we spoke about this last week in detail, a rebellious elder, somebody who is part of the Sanhedrin, who does not hold by the Sanhedrin's view and goes around publicly paskening against the opinion of the Sanhedrin. He is called a Zakein Mamrei, a rebellious elder, and his punishment is strangulation. Now, a very serious business, obviously. So there were various restrictions made to this halacha, pretty similar sort of idea to the Ben Sorer Umoreh, the rebellious son, upon whom many restrictions were made in order that it never actually happened. So the same sort of thing, really. This Zakein Mamrei could only be charged and convicted if the Bet Din, the Sanhedrin against whom he was speaking, were located in their usual home, which was the Lishchat Gazit, the chamber of the hewn stone. And if you remember last week, I showed you pictures of that, and we explained why it's called the chambers of the hewn stone. I don't want to go over the whole thing. If you can't remember or you weren't there, go and have a look at the recording. And then sometimes they moved out. The Sanhedrin moved out, and they were found in this place called Beit Pagi. And there was a machloket as to where this was, but basically it was not in the courtyard of the Bet Mikdash. And if the Bet Din was in this other place, then the rebellious elder could not be charged and convicted. What's that got to do with us? Well, the question that was asked by Rav Yosef was, what are they doing outside? What's the Sanhedrin doing outside of the Lishchat Hagazit, of their normal place in the chamber of the hewn stone. Why have they moved out? And he said it can't just be that they were on the way home, because they wouldn't all be going together. And they wouldn't all be going to the same place. So they must have gone for a specific reason, i.e. a dvar mitzvah. They must have, the Bet Din must have exited their normal place to go and do something specific. And he postulates that what they were all going to do was to go and do this measurement. And so from there, he says, although that's not explicit in this brisa, the brisa just says, it's over here. The brisa just says, Mi matzi nafki, why did they go out? Why did they go out? It must be because it's a dvar mitzvah. And what mitzvah must that be? It must be the measurements in the Eglah Arufa case. Wonderful. That's clear. So then along came Abaye, and Abaye said no. He rejected that proof and said they might have gone out for another reason, not to measure the Eglah Arufa. Because all it says is they'd gone out. It doesn't say why they'd gone out. And he postulated, Abaye postulated, that they'd gone out to annex a bit more of the city because they needed to widen the city and have more space. And that takes the full Bet Din to do that. Obviously, annexing space is a serious business, as we know from the modern day, and that required the whole Sanhedrin to do it. So the Abaye said, your proof, Rav Yosef, that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is correct is not a good proof, because you're only guessing that they'd gone out to do this measurement. They might have gone out to do a bit of annexation of the city to widen it. So that's where we left it last time. We left it last time that at this moment, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov does not have any support for his view that all 71 judges of the Sanhedrin, plus the Kohen Gadol, plus the king, were required for the measurements. So Rav Yosef is not finished yet, and he comes back against Abaye with another brisa. Now, you'll see in a minute that this brisa is a much stronger brisa than the first one. So it begs the question as to why he didn't bring this one in the first place. And maybe we'll discuss that in a second. But let's have a look at it. We're over here, where my pointy thing is. Can you see the screen, yeah? Yeah, okay. So there's a brisa that says, Tanya Kvate de Rav Yosef. There's another brisa that Rav Yosef that speaks about the opinion of Rav Yosef, or agrees with the opinion. Matza'an abeit pagei. So if the Bet Din is in this Bet Pagei, the Sanhedrin's in Bet Pagei, it's not in the chamber of the hewn stone, the Himra Aleihen, and this elder rebels against them. And this one, this brisa tells us exactly why they might have gone to the Beit Pagei. The first brisa didn't. This one does, and it says, Kagon, for example, Sheyatsa'u limedidat eglah. They went out to measure the distance of the corpse to the city, ulahosif al ha'ir al harazot, or to annex the city. Yachol, I might have thought shetahei hamra'ato hamra'ah. I might have thought that the rebellious elder is considered to be rebellious. Talmud Loma, same thing as the previous brisa. No, that's not the case. He only gets done, as it were, if they're in their home of the Lishchat HaGazit, the chamber of the hewn stone. And the pasuk that they bring is what we looked at last time, Bekamta ba'alita elamakom. And they shall arise, and you shall arise and go to the place where Hashem will choose. Melamed, to teach us, Shehamakom Goreh, that the place is relevant. So the second half of the brisa has nothing to do with us. It's just the brisa itself. But this second brisa here clearly states explicitly, it was only implicit in the first brisa that Rav Yosef brought, why they'd gone out. But in the second brisa, it's explicit that they had gone out to measure the corpse distance. And they'd all gone out because the whole Bet Din was found at this place, Beit Pageh. So here, this proves, according to Rav Yosef, that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov's opinion that all 71 Sanhedrin judges were required to measure this corpse. Now, where does that leave us? First of all, why didn't Rav Yosef bring the second brisa first? He wouldn't have then needed the first brisa. Second brisa is better than the first brisa. Why didn't he bring the second brisa first? Any suggestions? Well, I think I think there is only one answer. He hadn't thought of it. Because if he had, he'd obviously have brought it. Why would he bring a weaker proof? And so I think this demonstrates to us an interesting approach, because what you see is somebody brings an argument, brings a brisa and says, I think that's a good proof. Somebody else, in this case, Abaye, says, no, I don't think you're right, because it could be this. And then you can almost see the cogs working in Rav Yosef's brain and says, you know what, Abaye, you're right. I need to go back and have another look. You're right. My proof is not a good enough proof. Let's see if I can find something else which assists me. And then he goes away and he goes onto Wikipedia and he finds the second brisa and he brings the second brisa. And I think it demonstrates a number of things. One, that Rav Yosef was willing to listen to his opponent's view, accept his opponent's view, and then go back and think again. How many times do we see and hear and get involved in discussions where one of the proponents of a particular view digs their heels in, and even though they really know that they've been caught with a better argument, they dig their heel in and are not prepared to give. That's a very common scenario in politics today, that people are not prepared to give and say, yes, you've got a point. And Rav Yosef was willing to do that. And secondly, it demonstrates that he didn't give up. He went back and he found another brisa, which was better still. What we don't find, because we've now come to a little symbol over here, which tells us we're onto a new subject, we don't find Abaye's response. And I suspect that means that Abaye must have said, well, I've got nothing to say on that brisa. I can't argue with that brisa because that's explicit. And so Abaye probably had to back off there and say that the argument of Rav Yosef supporting Reb Eliezer ben Yaakov was a good one. So where does that leave us with the halacha? Because the Mishnah says 3, Rabbi Shimon says 3, Rabbi Yehuda says 5, and Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says 71.
Isn't he arguing against himself to some extent? Because it says, it teaches us that the location determines the authority of the Sanhedrin. Therefore, if they were out looking at the body and measuring the body, they weren't actually in the courtyard. Therefore, did they have any authority out there? So got a little problem there.
That's interesting. Well, they were out doing a job that they had to go out to do. So presumably, while they're out doing that job, their authority goes with them. But regarding the Zakein Mamre, the rebellious elder, the fact that they had to be in the Lishchat HaGazit, I think is very much like the Ben Sorer or Moreh idea, and that is that the Torah Shabbal Peh, the oral law, really does not like the written law as it appears, and therefore defines it and makes it more difficult to apply. So if we take the idea of the Ben Sorero Moreh, the rebellious child, the Torah tells us in Parashat Ki Tetzei that if you have a rebellious child who doesn't listen to the voice of his father and his mother, the parents have to grab hold of him and take him to the Bet Din, and there he is judged, and it's found that that is the case. He gets stoned to death. And the Gemara says that this never happened. And why did it not happen? Because they darshan the psukim. The psukim say that he did not listen to the voice of his father and his mother. And the Gemara says, well, the father's voice and the mother's voice have to be equal. And the father and the mother have to be equal. We would say that that is sort of metaphorical, meaning that they have to speak with one voice. But in order to have a situation where there would never be such a thing as a rebellious son, the Gemara says, no, it means it literally. The mother's voice and the father's voice have to be exactly the same. In other words, they have to be the same pitch, the same tone, the same everything. They also have to be the same size, height, weight, etc., which of course can never happen. And so the Gemara says that the situation of a Ben Sorah Umorah never happened, and it's only there to teach us various principles. And I think that this Zakein Mamrei idea that it was only the case when it was in the Lishchat HaGazit, the chamber of the hewn stone, is a similar idea. I think that what they're trying to do is to limit the possibility of a Zakein Mamrei being strangled, because really no Sanhedrin wants to bring about the strangulation of one of their members. So I think that's what that's all about in terms of the chamber of the hewn stone. But your point is a fair point, Michael. But I think we have to say that when the Sanhedrin doesn't have to be out, it must be in the Lishchat HaGazit. But when they can't do their job there, and they clearly can't do their job of measuring the corpse unless they go to the corpse, and they can't actually look at the annexation where they're actually annexing unless they go and look at the annexation, there they have no choice but to leave, and their authority goes with them. Okay? Not really. Michael's not really happy with that, but it's the best that I can do. Can anybody help further? Anybody make Michael a little happier today? No, apparently not, Michael. That's the best you're going to get today, I'm afraid. Right, let's move on. Let's have a look at the next part. Little S here tells us we're going to a new subject.
Sorry, Johnny, just before we finish this subject, you were going to say about who the halacha follows and why.
Okay, I wasn't going to say why because I don't know why, but the halacha follows Rabbi Shimon, that we require 3 judges for this measurement, and it does not follow Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, presumably because it's just not practical to get the king and the Kohen Gadol and 71 judges. The halacha, we follow Reb Shimon, we follow the Mishnah and Rabbi Shimon. 3 judges are required. I don't know why, how the halacha was paskened like that, but that is the bottom line. Yes, Jeffrey.
It seems they seem to be going to an awful lot of trouble for an unknown deceased. What happens if this this person was a bad person? He was a ganef, he was a thief, he was a murderer. Would they need to go to such trouble?
Yes, I think they would, because I think that the principle here is actually, it's nothing to do with who the person was. The principle is that a person was found dead, and a lot of the discussion we've had has implied, but not explicitly stated, that he was murdered, this fellow. So we found a person who's dead, probably murdered, close to a city. The concept that this is all about is about taking responsibility. It's about the elders of the city. Remember, it's the elders of the city that have to do this procedure of the Egla Arufa, of breaking the neck of this heifer. And what they have to do in this procedure is to openly and publicly declare that they were not responsible for the death of this person. And in some ways, they are, by doing this procedure, they are almost saying, well, I wonder whether we could have done more for this person. Did we, everybody in the community, take enough care for this person? And it's the kind of thing that you see when in a community a tragedy occurs. So, for example, in a community where you find, and this happened recently in Manchester, there was a spate of young people who committed suicide. Several young people, teenagers and what have you, and it was a tragedy, and it engendered, quite rightly so, some soul searching amongst the community, the leaders of the community, the teachers, the people that were involved with these young people. Have we done enough to provide for these people? Did we pick up any signs that we should have been more sensitive to? And it causes, when tragedies occur, whatever the tragedy is, it causes soul searching. And that's what this Egla Arufa was about. Somebody's been murdered, or somebody's died on our watch, as it were, close to our borders. Did we do enough to help them? Did we send them on their way with a smile? Did we give them provisions? Did we tell them the right way to go? Did we tell them to avoid a certain area which is notorious for bandits or what have you? In other words, did we care enough for this person? And the Egla Arufa ceremony is really it's to concentrate our minds on taking responsibility for people. I mean, it can go to extremes, ridiculous extremes, and I'll give you an example. In one of the magazines that are the freebie magazines that are given out, I was back in Manchester for a period of time during the COVID, when it was at its height. There was a full-page advert in the North Manchester Circular that basically said that this terrible tragedy of COVID, which is claiming the lives of so many people, is all due to the fact that women wear long shekels, and that we should re-evaluate our level of sniut, and in particular, we should stop our women folk wearing shoulder-length shekels. Well, you know, I have to say, my first thought on reading that was that's absolutely ridiculous and you know, pathetic. But if you take away that, at least these people are stopping and thinking, a tragedy is occurring. How can I help it? I might think that what they're suggesting is a bit stupid, and I do, but give them credit for at least stopping and saying, well, there's a tragedy gone on here. Could I have prevented it? And that's what this Egla Arufa is about. So to answer your question, Jeffrey, it don't really matter whether the guy's a schlechter or not. The fact is, we have a responsibility, and the town had a responsibility to send him on his way in as best a possible manner as they could. And the Egla Arufa situation is an opportunity for some soul searching, I think. Okay. Right.
Yeah, Johnny.
Yes.
Sorry, the halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda.
Says who?
Rabbi Art Scroll, based on Yerushalmi and the Rambam. If you remember, we had the other case with Rabbi Shimon with Samicha. So they said that we follow Rabbi Shimon as far as Samicha is concerned, that only 3 judges are required, but for this 5 are required, according in line with Rabbi Yehuda. Can
you point me in the direction of that? Because maybe I misread it. Maybe I was reading the Smicha bit. Could be.
No, it's. I don't think it's shown in the Gemarah, in the Art Scroll Gemarah.
Right. Interesting. Okay. Fine. Thank you for that. I must have misread it because I read when I was reading that up. But it may well be that I misread it and I was reading about the Smicha case because, of course, they are together in the Mishnah, so it's quite likely that I may well have made a mistake. Thank you for correcting that.
Okay, if you remember, you probably don't, it's a long time ago now, I sent you a couple of articles on Orlah and Neta. I think it was before Yom Kippur. And one of the reasons that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov's position is rejected, apart from the fact that it's not in a Mishnah, it's only in a Baraisa, is the fact that the requirement for Orlah and Neta would be someone that was a Meis Mitzvah. So he died in a particular place, and the halacha says that his body can't be moved until the Sanhedrin arrives and does the measurements and comes to a conclusion as to how this person died. And depending on what part of Eretz Yisrael this Meis Mitzvah was found, it could take up to 2 weeks for the Sanhedrin to reach that place. Therefore, to keep the concept of Kovod HaMeis, respect for the dead, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov's position is rejected because it could take too long for the Sanhedrin to reach the Meis Mitzvah. All during this time, the mace would require shmirah. It would require guarding. So all in all, it would be totally unsatisfactory.
Okay, so that's presumably not because of distance, though, David, because if you need 5 judges or 3 judges and they're in Yerushalayim, it's going to take the same length of time for 5 to get there as 71. Presumably, it's an administrative problem, which is what we thought of in the first place, and that
exactly.
is getting the king and getting the Kohen Gadol and getting all 71 of them. Yeah. I can't go today because I've got to go to the dentist, or I can't go today because my dog's having a shampoo or something. To get all 71 of them together. So it's probably not an issue of distance, because it's going to take the same time for 3 of them to get there as 71. If they all leave at the same time, it's going to be an administrative thing, isn't it? That to get the king there, to get the Kohen Gadol and all 71 of them, which is really what we said in the first place, and that makes perfect sense. So that's really interesting. Does it say in those articles why they paskin like Rabbi Yehuda and not Rabbi Shimon?
I can't remember.
Okay,
I'll look it up.
Look it up. Okay, fine. Okay. Excellent, really interesting. Let's move on to the next part of the Mishnah. We're going right back to the Mishnah now.
Johnny?
Yes, Marcel.
Just before you move on, we've been talking about all the time about the town being responsible for seeing him on his way, but have we not, I don't recollect us speaking about him coming to the town, not going from the town, that he was on his way to the town.
You mean, yeah, okay. Well, so what you're saying is a person is found close to a town he's not yet arrived at.
Right. I mean, they would know if he'd arrived because they would know if he'd been there.
That's a fair comment. Now, that's a fair thing. He's moving from A to B, and he's not yet reached B, but he's closer to B than A. Then if you measure him, he's closer to B that means that B will have responsibility to do the Egla Arufa. Doesn't seem fair, that. How are they meant to look after him? He's not even arrived yet. That's a good question. I don't know. Anybody help? How can town B be responsible for somebody who hasn't yet arrived?
Does he know that somebody's coming?
Well, I mean, how would you know, Nachum? I mean, you know, are we expecting them to have, you know, lookouts every kilometer? Don't know.
So
It's a very good question, that,
So
Marcel.
there's
Okay.
no
Homework.
no expectation whatsoever that somebody's coming.
Well, let's say you've got a distance of 10 kilometers between A and B, and 4 kilometers from B, the fellow dies. How are the people 4 kilometers away who never met him in their life before, who doesn't even know that he's on the way, how are they meant to know that he's on the way? And Kal v'chomer, if it's further distance, I think that's a very, very good question, Marcel.
But he's come from somewhere, hasn't he?
Yeah, they're coming from somewhere, is we understand. But if he's got more than halfway from A to B, then the people when we do the measurements, he'll be found to have been closer to B, and A are off the hook.
It all seems to hinge on who found him. The people from town A or town B.
Well, it's not a matter of who found him, it's where they found him. It's a measurement that's the issue here. That's a very good question. I don't know the answer to that. We will have to do some homework on that. Everybody has got homework now. Let's see if we can come up with some answers. Somebody must have asked that question before, Marcel. That's not to belittle your question. It's an excellent question, but there must be an answer somewhere along the line from somebody. So let's see if we can find one. Or let's see if we can come up with one ourselves. It'll be even better. Then it can go in my Chidushe Poleg book. Right. Okay. Excellent question. Let's move on. And we'll come back to that, hopefully to that next week with an answer. Okay. We're back in the Mishnah now. I flipped back to the Mishnah and I had a look. If you remember, this is a very, very long Mishnah. The Mishnah that we started with actually this week, 3 years ago, 3 years ago. We started this Gemarah on the 3rd of November, 2019. So 3 years ago tomorrow, we started the Mishnah. And about a third of the way into the Mishnah, that's how far we are. And the Mishnah says, Neta Revai Umasa Sheni She'ein Damav Yudu'in Bishlosha. Lots of things to talk about in that sentence. Neta Revai, the produce of the 4th year. We'll come back to it in a second. Umasa Sheni, and the 2nd tithe. She'ein Damav Yudu'in. Its value, Damav, its value is not known. Bishlosha. The value is estimated by 3 judges. This is in our Mishnah because, of course, the Mishnah began with the words Dine Mamanot Bishlosha. Monetary matters are settled by 3 judges. So it's in the Mishnah because these are other matters which are dealt with by 3 judges, according to the Mishnah. So the 4th year produce, the 2nd tithe, where we don't know how much they're worth, their value is estimated by 3 judges. So what we need to do now is spend some time understanding what Neta Revai is, what is this 4th year produce, and what Ma'aseh Sheni, what is the 2nd tithe. Okay, so that's what we're going to do now. Neta Revai. What is Neta Revai, the 4th year well, what is the word neta, first of all? Where does the word neta come from? What's the root of the word?
Plant.
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 Yes, correct. Plant. To plant. Linatoa is to plant. So a 4th year plant, in other words, something which has been planted and it's in its 4th year of life. What are we talking about here? Anybody know? What is this 4th year plant we're talking about?
A tree.
And
Has to be a tree.
It is a tree. It's a tree that's 4 years old.
Right.
What's special about a tree that's 4 years old that
Well,
we might need to value?
You have to bring the fruit to the temple.
That's right. You have to bring the fruit to the temple. Let's have a look and find, how do we know that? How did you know that, Nachum?
I don't know. I must have read it somewhere.
You must have read it somewhere. That is true. You must have read it somewhere. I will show you where you might have read it. You might have read it in Parshat Kedoshim. Vayikra, chapter 19. I will get it on the screen for you now. Can you see the screen? Yeah. Okay, so here we go. Jeffrey, can you see the screen? Okay, unmute yourself, please. And read for us verse 23 and 24.
When you come to the land and you plant any food tree, you shall surely block its fruit from use. It shall be blocked from use for 3 years, not to be eaten. And in the 4th year, all its fruit shall be holy, a praise to the Lord.
Okay, so here we have, in Parshat Kedoshim, we have 2 halachot, which Nachum summarized a minute ago. The first one is in verse 23. When you come to the land and you plant a tree, which is a fruit tree, a food tree, you shall block its fruit from use. And look at the word over here in the Hebrew, where my pointer is. Va'araltem orlato et pirio. Araltem orlato. What's the root of that word?
Orlah.
Orlah. Orlah.
Is what you cut away from the grace.
Resh Lamed Hey. Orlah. And that is, we'll come to that bit in a second, Nechama, what you just said. But this Orlah is the halacha. If you ask somebody, what is the halacha of Orlah? They may say one of 2 things. What they will say is that there is a halacha that a fruit tree cannot, the fruit of a fruit tree planted in Eretz Israel cannot be eaten for the first 3 years. So when I moved here and bought my house in 2008, my father, of blessed memory, said that he wanted to buy some fruit trees for my garden. And we went to the, what do they call it? The garden center place where they sell these trees. And he bought for me 3 fruit trees. Bought me a lemon tree, a clementine, no, 4, clementine, lemon, orange, and grapefruit. And each one of them had a little label on that said when it was born, when it was first planted. Because obviously I didn't buy a little tree that was that big. The tree that I bought was, you know, a little sapling. And it was, these were 2-year-old trees. And the reason it had that little label on was to tell me that if I got any fruit from it, I would know when I could eat the tree, eat the fruit from the tree. Because for the first 3 years, you're not allowed to eat it. It's Orlah, which means blocked. And that is the halacha of Orlah, and that applies to all fruit trees planted in Eretz Yisrael. It does not apply to fruit trees outside of Eretz Yisrael. So that is the halacha of Orlah.
Yeah, but
Now,
did anybody explain this? What is it just don't ask a question and just do it? Or is there some reason, some underlying reason that says everybody except the Jews is eating the fruit as soon as they can when it's...
Also the Jews when it's not in Israel.
Yeah, when it's not in Israel. So what's the value of this to us?
in other words, you're asking, is this a chok? Is this just a statute of which we don't know the reason for it?
Oh, okay. If we don't,
or is there a reason? That's what you're asking. Or is there an underlying reason? Now, as far as the Torah agricultural laws only applying in Eretz Yisrael, the reason for that is, as the Ramban will tell you, that we are meant to be living in Eretz Yisrael. Hope you're listening, Michael, very carefully. We're meant to be living in Eretz Yisrael, and even halachot, which would be a good idea to do. For example, the halachot of peah, shikha, and leket, the halachot of leaving the corner, the gleanings, and the forgotten bits for the poor. Everybody would agree that that's a good idea to do, even outside of Eretz Yisrael. But it is not a halacha outside of Eretz Yisrael, because we are meant to be in Eretz Yisrael. The Torah was given for Eretz Yisrael, and therefore it only is obligatory in Eretz Yisrael. So the fact that it is not obligatory outside of Eretz Yisrael does not mean that it's not a good thing to do outside Eretz Yisrael. The reason for the other ones I mentioned, for leaving them for the poor, is obvious. The reason we leave them for the poor is because the poor are hungry and we need to feed them. So that applies equally outside of Eretz Yisrael. But it doesn't mean that it's an obligation, because the Torah was given for Eretz Yisrael. And in fact, the Ramban, you would use this as a support for his view that the Torah is meant to be kept in Eretz Yisrael, and anything that you do outside Eretz Yisrael does not have the same quality of mitzvah as if you do it inside Eretz Yisrael. Now that
we keep mitzvahs in Chutz La'aretz, though.
We do, and the Ramban has a very radical view that the mitzvahs that we keep outside of Eretz Yisrael are actually all d'Rabbanan. We're only doing them as practice for when we come to live in Israel. It's not. It's a dat yochid. It's a Ramban's view. Many people disagree with him, but his view is that you can only fulfill a Torah mitzvah properly in Eretz Yisrael. That's the Ramban's view.
Does the tree gain any benefit? I mean, are we doing this for the welfare of the tree? You think there's some underlying physiology that this tree is going to be better off if you don't eat its fruit for a few years?
Well, that is what I think, Nachum. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Where I was coming to is, you asked two questions at the same time. You said, is there any underlying reason for it? And why does it only apply to Eretz Yisrael? So I answered the second question first. It only applies to Eretz Yisrael because the Torah is meant to be kept in Eretz Yisrael. Doesn't mean that it's not a good thing to do outside Eretz Yisrael, but it's not obligatory. That was the second part of your question. The first part of your question, is there any reason for it? I think there probably is an agricultural reason for it. And that is that a tree that is only 1 or 2 years old or 3 years old doesn't have great strength yet. And and therefore, if we don't use it, we don't eat its fruits, we're giving it some ability to. We don't pick its fruits. Give it its time to gain its strength before we take its fruits. That's what I think. I've not actually read that anywhere, so I don't know. But it seems to me that
pick the fruit. You can pick the fruit, though.
What are you going to do with it? Can't eat it.
I know, but it says you can't eat, not to be eaten, but you can throw it away.
I suppose you could.
That'd
You
be
can't
better
eat
for the
it.
fruit.
I assume,
Tree, that's what I mean.
yeah, I understand that. So if you're taking it off the tree, what difference does it make whether you eat it or you don't eat it? I don't know is the answer, but it seems to me instinctively, Nachum, it seems instinctively to me that we're being taught here that we should allow things to take hold and to gain their strength before we use their fruits.
Also gives, I was just thinking, maybe it also gives you strength. You look at it, you want to eat it, and you have control over yourself to not eat it because God said you can't eat it until a certain time. So we have a history of eating fruit that caused all kinds of problems. Maybe God is trying to reinforce something that Adam and Chava were having a difficult time with, but it's remembrance.
That's a very interesting idea because it fits in with what we're going to talk about in the next pasuk, which is the Neta Revai, the 4th year. Because as you correctly said, on the 4th year, we have to take it to Yerushalayim. And the reason for that is because verse 24, and in the 4th year, all its fruits shall be holy. A praise to the Lord. We'll come to back in a minute. So that would fit in a way. We'll come back to that in a moment. Yes, Marcel.
It says that we can't eat it, but does it say that the animals can't? We can't feed it to our animals?
Is Orlah asur b'hana'ah? Is Orlah forbidden to get any benefit from it? Don't know. I suspect yes, but don't know. David, do you know?
No, good question. Another good question.
Another good question. You're on fire today, Marcel. Okay, don't know that either. We need to look. Let's have a. That might just be able to find that in Halachipedia. Give me 1 sec, and I'll see what Halachipedia says on that. Interesting question. Let's just have a quick look and see if. Here we go. Overview of the laws of Orlah. Right. So the source, we know where it comes from. Interestingly, there is an opinion, I've just seen they say, which I wasn't aware of. There is an opinion, don't think it's the halacha, but there is an opinion that even fruits grown outside of Eretz Israel are applicable to Orlah, but I don't think we paskin like that.
It said pleasure. Did you see that in the beginning? You went past it quickly, but it mentioned that Orlah it's something about pleasure. I saw it.
Okay, that's very interesting, and I want to come back to that in a moment.
Oh, okay.
Once the Jewish people came to the land of Israel, all fruits grown on newly planted trees could not be consumed, sold, gifted, or used for any form of pleasure. For the first 3 years. There's your answer, Marcel. It is osur b'hana. You can't have any benefit from it.
Yeah.
You can't have any benefit from it. It is asur b'hana. So we've got the answer to that question. Now, that's very interesting that you noticed that word pleasure there, and I'll tell you why that's interesting. We'll come back to the reasoning of Orlah in a moment. But before I forget, I want to pick up on that point of pleasure, because there is another halacha which involves the word Orlah. And what is that?
Brit Milah.
Brit Milah, correct. Brit Milah is a circumcision. And when you do a Brit Milah, what do you actually do?
You take off the Orlah.
You take off the Orlah. The Orlah is the foreskin.
Yeah.
Okay, so the same halacha, the same word is used for the not using the fruit for 3 years. That's called Orlah. It's the same word that means circumcision. And in a Brit Milah, we remove the Orlah. Now, one of the explanations for a Brit Milah, and this is where I think, Nachum, that your explanation, I think, fits beautifully with this. One of the explanations that's given for why we do a Brit Milah, and by the way, as a flip side, this is one of the reasons that the anti-Brit Milah brigade are anti-Brit Milah. And that is that apparently removing the Orlah reduces the sensitivity and the pleasure of the penis, of the head of the penis. In other words, sexual activity is less pleasurable without an Orlah. That's what they say. I cannot tell you that one way or another because I have nothing to compare it with. But apparently that is the case, that the Orlah, which is a covering over the gland penis, preserves its sensitivity, and removing that reduces the sensitivity and therefore reduces the pleasure. Now, why would we want to do that? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying to us, as it were, you're going to reduce this because this is an animal instinct and you need to be in control of that animal instinct. And that's how you're going to demonstrate your connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, by doing a Brit Milah. Okay, so that fits in very nicely with what Nachum said. I think this can go in Chidushei Poleg, that Nachum says that the idea of the Orlah with fruit is that we have to exert some control over ourselves. Adam and Chava failed to exert the correct control over themselves in Gan Eden when they ate fruit that they were told not to eat. And we are here having to demonstrate a level of control over our behavior with Orlah. We see this beautiful fruit. For the first 3 years, we have to withhold ourselves. And that fits in very well with the concept of Brit Milah, as I've just explained it, as per many of the Meforshim that say the idea of Brit Milah is in fact one of control, one the most animal drive that we have, which is the sexual drive to procreate, has to be curbed and has to be reduced. That's what Brit Milah is about, and it's very interesting, isn't it, that the word Orlah is used for this halacha of fruit. I think that that's really, really interesting, and I think that that is a big support for Nachum's view that the reason for Orlah is one of self-control. Let's have a look and see here if there's any. Here, this is all about the halachot. It's not about the reasons for it. So Halachipedia told us what we needed to know for Marcel's question, and that is that it is asur b'hana'ah, but it doesn't tell us the reason. Okay, so we will have to do that as part of our homework as well. What was our first piece of homework? Oh yes. What about the guy who's on the way to a city? That's the first piece of homework. And the second piece of homework is, are there any other reasons for the mitzvah of Orlah other than Nachum's suggestion of self-control, which I think is a very good one. All right, excellent, excellent, excellent. Let's go back to the Chumash. So we now know what Orlah is. For 3 years, you can't eat the fruit of a tree. Then what happens in the 4th year? Verse 24 tells us, in the 4th year, all its fruits shall be holy. ובשנה הרביעית יהיה כל פריו, קודש הילולים להשם. Kodesh is holy. Hilulim. What's the root of that word? Marcel.
Parking, happiness.
Say again, Nechama.
Parking.
Partying.
Happiness.
Happiness,
Hallel.
praise. Johnny's right. Yes, praise. Hallel. It's the same word. Hey lamed lamed. Hallel means praise. What other word with that in do we say very regularly?
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Correct. Hallelujah means praise be the Lord. Okay. What about Tehillim? Tehillim is the same word. Tehillim, which we translate as Psalms, whatever that means. What's Psalms? If I said to you, what are Psalms, Johnny? What would you say?
Yeah, well, you said it the other night of this year.
Yeah, they're Tehillim. Psalms are Tehillim, aren't they? They're praise to God. So yeah, so it's Kodesh, this fourth year fruit. So you've done your 3 years where you've not eaten it. Now, this is definitely something to do with control, and it's something to do with thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it fits in, I think, really nicely with Nachum's explanation of Orlah, because you've done 3 years where you've really wanted to eat these fruits, but you can't eat them. And now the fourth year, you're allowed to eat them. But you can't just dive in. You've got to do it in a way which shows that the fruit is holy and it is a praise to Hashem. So what do we do with things that are holy, generally speaking?
We bury them. We bury them, no?
We do bury them if they're holy, yeah, but that's only...
We give part of them to the holy people.
The holy what?
We give them to God, to the temple.
The Kohanim or to in the temple.
Correct. We take them to Yerushalayim. What is Yerushalayim called?
Ir HaKadosh.
Yeah.
Ir HaKodesh, the holy city. So if Yerushalayim is Ir HaKodesh, the holy city, then we have to take, and we know that this fourth year fruit is called Kodesh. It makes sense that we have to take it, this holy fruit, and we have to take it to the holy city. We have to take it to Yerushalayim.
How many do you take? 1, 5, 20, a bushel?
Okay, very good question, Nachum, and the Gemarah is going to tell us all about the answer to that question. Okay, you might have to wait till next week because we only got 30 seconds left, but we will get there. So the fruit is holy. The fourth year fruit is holy. It has to go to Yerushalayim, and then that's not all. Hilulim Lashem. It has to be a praise to Hashem. So what have you got to do with this fruit when you get to Yerushalayim?
You divide it up to different places.
The who?
The Kohanim.
Yeah.
No. As it happens, well, you can if you want, but you don't have to.
The
halacha of Neta Revai means you have to take the fruit to Yerushalayim and eat it there. It has to be eaten there. Now, if you have only grown one measly orange all of the fourth year, then you can take it to Yerushalayim and you can sit on your park bench and eat your orange, and you have fulfilled the mitzvah. But if you have got anything about you and you have got a whole orchard full of fruit trees, then you are going to have a ton of oranges to take to Yerushalayim. And you're going to get to Yerushalayim and you've got to eat them in Yerushalayim. And then what's going to happen? What are you going to say? I can't eat all these oranges.
You give them to Matat Lev Yonim.
You give them to everybody else. You say, come on, everyone. I've got all these oranges that have got to be eaten in Yerushalayim. Come and join me. Doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, right? Come and join me. You over there having a picnic. Come, I've got oranges. Come and have some oranges, right? And you go around giving out and what does that do? That causes friendship between one another, Oh, somebody comes to you and gives you an orange and says, here, this is a holy orange, have this, eat this orange. And you say, oh, it's very nice of you, thank you very much. And you feel very kindly towards this person because he's giving you an orange, right? The idea is that it engenders unity amongst the people, friendship, shalom v'reut. And that when we have shalom v'reut, we have friendship and brotherhood, then that is hilulim l'Hashem. That is praise to Hashem. So
But this is only when the temple is there. What are you doing today, nowadays? You're not supposed to eat it for 3 years. What are you doing on the 4th year?
Okay, we'll come to that next week as well, because it's part of the Gemarah that we're going to learn. So hold that question. Yes, Jeffrey.
And you take it to Leket.
You take it to Leket. Well, maybe. Let's see next week what you do with Neta Revai these days. We'll see that there. So we'll stop there for the moment. The 4th year fruit is holy. It has to be taken to the holy city and it has to be eaten there. It can be eaten by yourself if you want, or probably you've got too much and you have to share it out amongst everybody, and that causes hilulim l'Hashem. It causes a praise to Hashem.
1,000 years ago, you could be living in the Golan, and how in the world are you going to take things all the way to Yerushalayim? I mean, that's quite a difficult task to do.
It is indeed, and you will see in next week's exciting episode how they managed to do that.
Okay.
You're going to have to hang on, Nachum. Don't read on. It's a cliffhanger. Don't read on. We're going to do that next week. So that's the halachot of Orlah and Neta Revai that the Gemarah is talking about when it said that we need 3 judges for Neta Revai. But what do we need 3 judges for? We'll learn about that next week. Any other questions or comments before we close?
No, now I know why Goyish women like Jewish men.
Why is that?
No, we just learned it because you control.
Oh, I see. I understand. Okay. Yes. Okay. I don't think we'll go there. This is a family shiur.
I didn't tell her to say that. She did it on her own.
I heard one Goyish woman tells me we love only Jewish men. Now I understand why.
Hamevin Yovin.
Yeah.
Oh,
right.
Write your book, Nechama.
Okay, everyone. On that note, I think we will say goodbye.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye.
Bye, Johnny. Thank you.